Hey everyone, today I'm doing something a little bit different on the channel and taking a look back at the first 20 board games I bought for my collection to see, has my opinion changed? Are they still good? Are they still bad? And do I still own them? So I got into the hobby probably 9 years ago, around that time. So a lot of these games on this list were the go-to gateway games at the time. So it'd be interesting to see, have these held up and are they still considered those great gateway games? Now, before I get started on the list of games, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor, Keyender.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer. And if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Additionally, check out my first game, THALAMUS, that is now available for purchase, and send me an email if you want a copy. But let's get started. And these games are not in a particular order. I've just put them down here. So again, no rhyme or reason as to the order these games appear in. So first off, Codenames. So Codenames was a blockbuster hit. It has seemed to have faded a little bit more now because there is so much fierce competition out there when it comes to these party word games. Now, I tend to really enjoy this genre of games, and Codenames is certainly a kind of a pillar of that type of game. And I've had some good times with it, and I've also had some pretty bad times with it when it comes to bringing this out with big groups. This game has a tendency to fall quite flat because if you've got players who aren't particularly quick at thinking, the game can really draw to a halt and it takes forever for them to give a clue. And that's pretty much why I ended up passing on this one, or ended up getting rid of it from my collection. It was just too slow, and there was also some ambiguity and rule stretching that would always go on when playing this one. So I think there's so many better options out there now. I know games like The Crypto came along, and many others that I thought completely blew Codenames away. But still, a good gateway into the party games, or modern sphere of party games, but one that didn't stick around because it was just too slow. And next up, an older game here. So this is Strateggo. So Strateggo, I believe, came out in the 80s or 90s. But this one really intrigued me when I first got into the hobby because I like that idea of the hidden movement, moving around the board, your opponent not being able to see what you're deploying, and you're trying to try and find your opponent's flag by running troops into each other. The higher numbers will kill the lower numbers, but there were bombs as traps out there as well. So it was all about kind of eventually deducing where things could be, and hopefully try and work out your opponent's strategy and remember where things were. Now, out of all these games, believe it or not, this is probably one that I would want to go back and revisit. I think it's quite charming. It's a little bit long and maybe a few too many pieces on the board. But I do like that core concept of remembering where all the main players are, and has my opponent hidden the flag in plain view? Are they burying it in the corner over there? And so on. So I actually like this one. I just think it's been maybe a little bit outdated, and it struggled to get to the table because it is, again, it is a little bit longer than your average two-player game and maybe a little bit drier, but it's still actually quite good and aged pretty well. But I don't have it anymore. Next up, Suro. So Suro was quite popular at the time as well. So this is a super fast, like lightning fast tile placement game where you are trying to keep your little pebble on the board by placing these tiles. When you place a tile, you have to add it next to your little pebble, and you will follow the track, and you're trying to keep on the board as long as you can. This game has big kind of kingmaker issues. It's extremely lucky, but it's pretty fun for a micro game. I did play this one to death. I played this one probably 50, 60 times, and we've created loads of variants for ourselves. And it just got to a point where we kind of burnt out on it, really. We didn't really see the visit to go and visit this one anymore. But we got our money out of it. I would say give this one a go if it's out there. And I know there were some spin-offs as well that I did not try. But Suro's a solid one. The strategy is wafer thin. Next up, Dead of Winter. So this is definitely one of the big U-turns that I've played. So this one was like one of the peak hotness games at the time. It was so popular. It was this kind of immersive, story-driven zombie game where it was, I think it was the first game to introduce the crossroads mechanism, where on a player's turn, the next player would hold a card. And if a certain action was performed, then that player would trigger this story effect, which could mess with the gameplay. Really clever and novel concept, and I believe it has been done more since. The gameplay here is, again, pulls away from what I'm interested in now. A lot of luck, a lot of top decking, hopefully to draw the right card in this one. I have had some memorable moments playing it, ones that we still laugh about today, but I'm much more Eurocentric now. I mainly play Euro games. This one is nothing like that. It's much more story driven, a lot more, again, thematic. And to be honest, I think the gameplay mechanisms are actually extremely weak, as you're basically just trying to survive, donate the right cards, barricade the entrances to stop the zombies getting in, and it just does not work for me. It's far too long, and it's just not very good in my opinion, so that one did not last, despite me initially being quite enamoured by it. Next up, Legendary, the Marvel deck building game. So this was actually the first modern board game that I bought. Now, I grew up loving comic books, particularly Marvel comics, and at that time I was really back into revisiting the old comics and kind of brushing up on my knowledge. And when I saw this one on the shelf, I did not go out there looking for it. I thought that looks cool. It had like new, fresh artwork that I'd not seen before. And I ended up picking it up and learning about the deck building mechanism. I'd never seen that. And I think this was the first game that ever taught me that kind of game mechanisms could be thematic, because all of the powers of the heroes matched what the cards would do. I thought that was so genius. And I'd never seen anything like it before. I did a deep dive into this one. I ended up picking up tons of the expansions. I probably played it 70 times with my friends, going through all the different villains and so on. And it got to a point where it got so big and bloated, there was just too much stuff that it slowly stopped appearing. And it got to a point where I had so many more games by the time I parted with it that this one was just not going to see the light of day again. But I always give this some credit for getting me into the hobby, and it goes to show how much an IP can do if you're invested in the IP more than actual being interested in games itself. So that was Legendary. Moving on then, a car crash of a game called Munchkin. So I had the Marvel version of Munchkin, and again, at the time, not knowing any better, I thought it was quite fun. It was a quirky, kind of crazy game as you're bashing on your opponents, trying to level up. Now I can kind of see this game for what it is. It's a complete luck fest. The take that mechanisms are horrible. Some awful king-making mechanisms where normally the player who's winning will get smashed, and then the player who's second kind of creeps the victory. Full with faults, but I cannot criticise how popular this game is. And I do think the Marvel version of the game was a bit funner than the other ones, because it had some pretty crazy rules that would actually make the gameplay better. And I'm not an elitist at all, and a lot of people might criticise me saying, well, you're just bashing on mainstream games. That's not the case. I think there's great mainstream games out there, and I think Munchkin is objectively a terrible design that I wouldn't even play anymore. So that is Munchkin, and it also takes way too long. Next up, Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation. So this one is actually getting a reprint after being a kind of rare as hen's teeth for many years. So this is actually a variant on the Strateggo mechanism where you're moving pieces around secretly. This one player is the Shadow player, one's the Fellowship, and you are trying to get the ring into Mordor or to Mount Doom for being the Fellowship, and you're also trying to find the ring bearer by being the Shadow player. Now, much like Strateggo, you're just running pieces into each other, but this one's much more condensed. There's only a few pieces per team. The landscape also plays much more of a factor. And there's also card play mechanisms here. When you do get into a battle, you are playing a simultaneous card play mechanism to determine who wins the scrap. Now, I think this game is objectively very well designed. It's probably one of the most intense games that I've ever played. My only issue is, and it's more a personal issue, I think the game is purer without the cards. I think the cards actually take away from the gameplay. I'm not sure if there's a variant to combat that. But I'd be interested to see what the reprint has to offer, because again, it is a really good game. I'd go back and revisit this one, but I thought the cards were a little bit too swingy. And yeah, I didn't end up playing it as much as I thought I was going to when I initially bought the game, because I was obsessed with it when I first got this one. So that is The Confrontation. Keeping on the Lord of the Rings theme, we have War of the Ring. Massive, grandiose, area control game. Epic in its very core. This one, again, I can see why a lot of people love it. I loved it. The problem is that it takes so long. It's so fiddly. There's so many rules exceptions, fiddly things going on. The board is cluttered. It's hard to determine whose pieces are who. But if you want that full Lord of the Rings experience, this is pretty much as good as it gets. I'm not a huge fan of dice rolling mechanisms either. This one has a lot of that. But as an objective, creative piece, I think it's fantastic design. But I prefer, again, more mechanisms before theme and all this kind of stuff. This one is, again, kind of the opposite. Although it's mechanically sound, I prefer, again, more Eurocentric, autonomous games. And this one takes way too long to set up as well. So I'd play it again under the right circumstances, but it just takes too long, where you could play, 3 other Euro games in the time it takes to play one of War of the Ring. Next up, Lord of the Rings, the Living Card Game. Another game we did a real deep dive on. We went through all the scenarios, ended up buying all the expansions and so on. It got to a point where it required a bit too much of a commitment, and the deck building became too strong for me in order to really enjoy it much more. But I'm really glad I played this one a lot. So I got a good experience of it, and I still recommend it to people who want more of a lifestyle game where you're trying to manage your little deck of cards and characters to overcome unique missions. Next up, Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. Widely considered to be one of the best social deduction games. I happen to disagree with that, although I do agree with the fact that this probably has one of the lowest barriers in terms of the pressure being put on the players to lie. So this one, you're basically trying to point to a certain player who's the murderer, basically. What weapon have they used? What's their motive? And you're doing that by giving these secret clues. There's some people who are conspiring for or against the murderer and so on. It's good fun. Again, I played it too much. I got very bored of it, and every game seemed to be too samey. So that's Deception. Letters from Whitechapel, hidden movement game. Very clean, actually. Probably one of the purest examples of the hidden movement genre. And again, I appreciate it as a piece of design. Personally, I find it a little bit too frustrating, especially being the police trying to map out where Jack the Ripper has gone. And this one went for years without being played on the shelves, so didn't really play it much more. And I think I've kind of noticed that I'm not a huge fan of the hidden movement mechanism in general. Next up, Camel Up, another game that was a long stay in my collection. I think is a really good betting and wagering kind of racing game. I think there's better ones since. This one for me was directly replaced by Longshot, the dice game, which is, I think, a much more fun game and has a bit more going on. But this one, I can certainly see why it was a Spiel des Jahres winner, as you're betting on these camels that are piggybacking off each other, trying to work out the probabilities. I enjoy it. I'd still play it now. I'd probably still get a lot of fun out of it now, but it was a matter of it being replaced in the collection. So this one, probably one of the stronger games on this list. Next up, Through the Ages. So Through the Ages was, again, this was, I believe, #1 at the time on Board Game Geek in terms of, the best board game. So, of course, I had to play it. It took me a long time to learn it. Heavy Civ game with cards, lots going on, shifting cubes around. Again, lots of fiddly rules and things. And I like this one. It's too long. And I think the longer I've been in the hobby, the more I think that kind of the cleanliness of rules, the streamlining of rules, for me, that is real good game design. I know people have a preference for heavier games, but I'm not sure if the heavy lifting that's put on the players for games like Through the Ages is worth it when there are so many great games out there that are just as rich in terms of its gameplay strategies, but much easier to learn. And I think this one, the balance is just a little bit off, but I know it's immensely popular. Again, I still give it like a 6 out of 10, but it's not really anything I want to revisit anymore because, again, it's too long, too fiddly, and just too heavy. Splendor, a hugely popular game. I think sold millions of copies. Very streamlined engine builder, playing these kind of chips to acquire cards. The cards will make it cheaper to buy future cards, and it's a race to get to a certain amount of points. For me, initially very impressed with this one, did play it a lot. And the more I played more involved engine builders, the more I thought this one was just a little bit too repetitive, and I felt a bit laborious and tedious to me. I still feel that way now. When I play this one, I kind of feel very cold on it, to be honest. And that even goes for the re-implementation with Splendor Duel. I know a lot of people can really advocate Splendor Duel over this one. For me, I thought Splendor worked fine at 2 anyway, and I'm not quite sure why or how different they were. They felt very similar to me, and I wasn't impressed by Splendor Duel either. But if you like one, you're going to like the other. But for me, there's just so many better engine builders that I played after this one. Pandemic, kind of the OG godfather of cooperative games. This one, again, I really do appreciate what it's done for the hobby, how popular it's been, how good it's been for the hobby. And again, initially I liked it, but I think maybe just finding my feet with it was what I enjoyed with it rather than the game itself. I found like it was too susceptible for quarterbacking. And again, much like the hidden movement thing I mentioned earlier, I think as the years have gone by, I've really noticed that there aren't that many co-op games that work for me. I just prefer competitive games in general. I can't explain why. I just like being in control of my own stuff. This one, again, I've had some good games of it, some memorable games, but it's definitely in the past now. I've got no interest in playing it anymore. Carcasson. Carcasson did a fantastic job for me personally to get me more invested. It really did increase and amplify my intrigue and interest in board gaming, because it was the first game where you'd build the board as it went. I'd never played a tile placement game before. I liked the kind of medieval stuff in general, and I thought this game was so much fun. I played it a lot of times at all player counts. I had a few of the expansions. But this is for me a true gateway game where you naturally progress into other things, and this one just kind of gets forgotten and left in the shadow as more mechanisms are introduced. I just think the game is a little bit too light, not quite enough going on, and a bit too tactical for my tastes as I learned what my tastes were. Still, good game, again, an absolute classic, but completely numb on it now. I'm not really interested in playing it anymore. Next up, For Sale. For Sale, still one of the, if not the best auction and filler game I've ever played. I still have it in my collection. I still love playing it. Brilliant mechanisms as you're acquiring property. And there's a really awesome bidding system where if you pass, you don't necessarily are out the round. You just take the lower card available. And so passing it in the right order is important. Fascinating game. A game of 2 halves. Buying property and then selling property for profit. So quick, scales well, just a purest example of a great filler auction game. And yeah, I absolutely love and advocate this one non-stop. Battle Line. Battle Line, 2-player Knizian tug-of-war game. Still have this one in the collection, although I don't play it terribly often. I think mostly, or the main reason for that is because there is some stiff competition. You know, games like Air, Land and Sea or Compile have come out since Battle Line, but I think Battle Line is still, it's one of the most boiled down versions of a tug of war game, as you're playing these 3-card poker hands on multiple flags. Really good hand management, actually, one of the best examples of hand management, and the frustration of playing and picking up cards in the wrong order. But still, brilliant design, very clean, great classic 2-player that I think is a good hallmark of my collection, and one that I can never really see myself getting rid of. And I've just kind of inspired myself to get this one back to the table. The penultimate game, I have Operation Faust. Now, I have no idea how this one broke through the first 20 games that I bought, because it wasn't ever popular. This one is pretty much a variant on the coup game, if you're familiar with that one, where you're playing cards and kind of collecting tokens, but you can bluff with what you're playing and people can challenge you and so on. This one is actually, it's actually a lot of fun, and I think the meta game of this one really did build up quite well with my gaming group. We played it a lot. We had kind of in-jokes and so on that made it much more enjoyable. But again, I think we just burnt ourselves out on it and it became a bit too samey after a while. But if you like Coup, this is a good option to check out. It's similar enough to be, reminiscent, but different enough to be different. So that is Operation Faust. And the final game I'm talking about today is the Resistance Avalon, and one of the only few games on this list that I still have in my collection, I still love. This was actually my #1 game of all time for a good while. It's for me, the best social deduction game as you're trying to deceive each other and make people pass or fail missions. I love the way that all the roles synergize in this one. I went through a period of playing this one quite often. I'm in a big dry spell now, because normally I play at 3 or 4 players. This one you want 6+ players to really enjoy. So I will try and bring this one out in the next big gathering of players that I get. But I love it. I think this game is so genius. I've not gotten to the point where I've seen and done everything in the game. I know a lot of players have played this 200 times and they're kind of done with it. I'm not at that point. I've only played it like 20 times or something. So there's still a lot more for me to enjoy here. For me, this is always the measuring stick when it comes to social deduction. And I even got the newer version, Quest, but that one's not seen the light of day either. So really need to get this one back to the table as soon as possible, really, if I get the opportunity. But still, an absolutely fantastic and stellar design that I love. So that's it, really. So something a bit different there. I went on a bit longer than I expected, but hopefully it's been nice to go back and see some of these games that were so popular many years ago, and are they still good now? Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. If you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.